Handpan.
The main sound that starts off the song is kind of a recreation of a handpan. I started off with the EQ'd bowl resample. It's a pretty long decay in the amp. I am cutting off some of the high frequency stuff here, adding a little bit of drive. And then with the LFOs, I'm doing a little tiny little bit of pitch modulation and a little bit of volume. Then I'm adding some chorus, a ring shifter, so lots of modulation on this one. Supermassive, pretty long delay and feedback. It's a darker reverb. Here's the EQ, very light, just cutting out some of this unwanted low-end noise, boosting mids, a little bit of this. All together, it sounds like this. So that's the handpan, which is kind of the main lead for a lot of this song.
The pad.
Over here, I'm getting into some looping. The loop is set to alternate. I decided to do this looping thing because it added volume modulation, but it also extended the sustain. And I'm using the mixed bowl here, which is different than the bowl EQ. Over here, I'm doing 40 millisecond attack, and then I am actually using a tiny little bit of sustain for this one since it is a pad, but it's mostly still decay. A little bit of release as well. Over here, quite similar to the amp envelope actually. And this is kind of a darker pad, so I didn't want too much of the high frequency stuff. Adding some drive, some pitch modulation. Look at that, 10 whole cents. I added a bit crusher. This is really what makes it sound the way that it does. I'm only blending around 14%, but I am doing some pretty heavy downsampling, adding some drive, cutting some lows. I'm using a tape echo by UAD. This is the only UAD plugin that I used on this entire session, I'm pretty sure. I barely know how to read these parameters, to be honest. It's doing something, so here's what it sounds like. So that's the pad layer.
Lead to attack.
This is one of the more in-your-face leads. So for this one, I'm using the EQ'd bowl again, doing a little bit of a hold, pretty fast decay, at least for this sound, and then a little bit of release. Pretty much immediate attack though. The filter envelope is actually doing quite a lot here. The depth is set quite high. Tiny little bit of reso, and then adding some drive. Had to fine tune it to make it perfectly in tune. Doing a little bit of pitch, 7 cents, just a little bit. And then a little bit of volume. Sounds like this. Kind of video game-like. I'm using this, which is a treble drive booster. I usually use this on like metal guitars and stuff, but in this case it worked. Brightening it up and adding a ton of drive. This is set quite bright as well. Supermassive again, pretty short setting. I am adding some modulation here as well. And then boosting some of this. Valhalla in this case is almost exclusively early reflections, or at least an early reflected sound.
Lead to granular.
That is doubled with this guy, which is playing a harmony. I tried to avoid doing granular synthesis as much as I could, but there were some situations that I just had to use it. This is not one of those situations. I could have not done this, but it definitely gives a very different sound. And these two together, the contrast between them, I really liked. So the amp and filter envelope are very similar. Tiny bit of drive, just a touch. I had to fine tune this one quite a bit. Whenever you do granular synthesis, you have to tune it. It's just part of it. So this grain is from the EQ'd bowl sound. It's close to a sine wave, but with a little bit of noise. Without the effects, it sounds like this. Again, this is like kind of video game territory for sure. I'm putting that through the same pedal, a little bit different settings. It's a little bit of a darker attack. Then I'm EQing it, relying on this layer to add more of the low frequency stuff. And then the other one is adding more of the attack and the high frequency transient information. And then I'm putting this one through stereo delay. So this is 16th dotted and 8th note. Little tiny bit of crossfeed, EQing it like this, and then mixed very low. So all together. And then both of them.
Harmony layers.
Along with these two synths, I'm also doing these, which are similar but different. And these are panned hard left and hard right. They're adding to the stereo image, but they're also playing harmonies. This is what I ended up with. This is granular. This is also the same grain. I'm pretty sure the envelopes are the same in both of these. Very similar to the ones we just looked at. I am driving them a little bit more here. Had to fine tune them, of course. So yeah, these are also going through the drive pedal, very heavy handed. I'm EQing out some of the lows and some of this stuff. Patches are pretty similar on left and right, but not identical. And then I'm also compressing them together. Very long release, adding more distortion here. I am EQing both of them, just cutting out more low and more high. They're also going to a special reverb just for them. Pretty short delay, pretty short feedback. It's very similar to the reverb that I had on this one. This one's a little bit shorter delay and longer feedback. This one's a little bit longer delay and a little bit shorter feedback. So those are the harm layers.
The Arp.
This is like kind of a bit crushed Arp, automating the downsampling, the volume, the feedback for the reverb, and the Arp rate, which happens later in the song. This is the EQ bowl, pretty short amp envelope, filter envelope, not doing a whole lot, driving it heavily, doing some pitch modulation, 7 cents, barely audible. That reverb swell that you're hearing there is actually on the mix bus. Threw a bit crusher on it, gotta love 8-bit. Doing some downsampling as well. Mixed it fairly low, tiny bit of drive. I got Supermassive on it. Again, this is being modulated, but it's more of a short room sort of sound. The feedback higher makes the tail longer, but it still kind of sounds like a smaller room. I am also doing some auto panning. So every 2 bars, it will go left and then right and then left and then right, but the depth is only 40% and the smoothing is maxed out. So altogether, the pad is the main element here, and then the Arp is just kind of like a background ambient layer. There's also Handpan here.
Manual Arps.
So on this element, I'm using the arpeggiator with this variation, and this is playing 30-second notes at this point in the song. These are manual arpeggiators, meaning I had to write the MIDI for them. I wanted specific patterns, so I didn't want to use the arpeggiator. So these patches are panned hard left and right. The processing on these ones are pretty light, just doing some downsampling, some drive, adding supermassive, pretty long delay and feedback. This one is the bowl EQ with this amp envelope. Filter envelope is doing quite a lot. Some drive here, fine tuning it. And this one is granular. The grain I chose actually looks a lot like a sine wave, but since the start is here and the end is here, it has to jump, which is going to add a bunch of harmonics to this sound. If I only did the peak to the peak, it would sound basically like a sine wave, which is not what I wanted in this case. Of course, you have to tune it. The amp and the filter envelope are similar to the other layer that it's doubled with. It's doing a lot with the filter envelope again. That one is going through the drive pedal, and then a similar instance of supermassive, but not the same. Together, they sound like this. Here's the left. And then the right.
Sawtooth type leads.
This is kind of like the climax of the song, I guess. So these two layers pan slightly left and right. This one is a granular thing. If I went from here to here, it would have a lot less harmonics. This is a very intense section, so I wanted a lot of harmonic information on this. Not doing a whole lot here. Amp envelope, filter envelope is also not doing much. I'm driving it a bit, had to fine tune it. Without effects, it sounds like this. Sounds kind of like a Sawtooth. I'm adding chorus, slow rate, medium intensity and mix, adding a little bit of body. With the processing, it sounds like this. And then the layer that it's doubled with. This one, I just wanted a ton of harmonics. You can see this signal is quite noisy. Definitely gave me the harmonics I was looking for. Starting the loop at a high point and ending at a low point adds to the harmonics even more. Here's the amp envelope. Filter envelope is barely doing anything. 3 cents of LFO pitch modulation. Without processing, it sounds like this. I wanted more harmonics than that, so I saturated it quite heavily. And then I added this EQ. With the processing, it sounds like this. And then both of them together. I wanted this to sound like power chords on a guitar, so that's why I created this patch here. Yeah, I just broke Logic. Oops.
Power chord layer.
Okay, we're back. So what I did is I added a synth just for that part. Pretty much just the Sawtooth granular synth here. Here's the amp and filter envelope. Driving it. OTT. I wanted it to sound ridiculous without OTT. With OTT. Then I'm putting it through the drive pedal. This time I'm also putting it through a metal guitar amp and cab, EQing a little bit, mostly just dipping the level. With the processing, it sounds like this. Extremely distorted. With the other layers.
The bell.
There's a bell layer here. This is one of my favorite layers in the whole song. This one, I'm using the mixed bowl. Here's the filter envelope. It's similar to this, but with a hold and with a release, without the effects. I then EQ'd it, boosting some mid-range, dipping here, boosting here. I did clip distortion. The filter's up at 7,900 hertz, quite high for clip distortion. I wanted to preserve the high end of this. And I also boosted at 84 with a high shelf, 7 dB afterwards. And then I put Supermassive on it. Great annihilator on this one. This one is crazy. Fairly short delay, very high feedback. So with all the processing, in context, the bell is just playing a single note. The handpan is playing chords around it.
The bass.
I have 3 basses, which I am adjusting the level of dependent on the section. There's a lot of automation stuff in this session that I don't have time to get into. Usually when I make a bass out of a non-musical sample, I will use granular synthesis because it just makes it so much easier. I can get straight to something similar to a sine wave, but in this case, I wanted to see if I could not use granular synthesis. So first and foremost, pitched it down. Here's the amp envelope, pretty long decay. I didn't just want to do max sustain here because I wanted it to have like kind of a bass guitar type decay. It just worked better for the song. So with the filter envelope, I'm getting transient, similar to a pick attack with a short decay and higher envelope depth. Adding some drive, fine tuning it. Sounds like this. It's got a kind of weird characteristic to it that I like. It's got some noise in there for sure. I decided that I wanted more consistent low end. This is basically a sine wave. I just picked the part of the sample that most closely resembled the sine wave. You can see I'm going from the high point to the high point, so there's very little harmonic information that's introduced. It's a similar amp and filter envelope to the other one. The EQ on this one looks like this, just dipping some mids. It's a similar EQ on this one as well. You can really hear the drive here. And there's also some drive coming from the bass bus. So that's the sine bass that's producing most of like the sub. And then bass dirty. It is what it sounds like. You can see on this one, I'm going from a high point to a low point to introduce more harmonics. The amp envelope is a little bit more punchy, a little bit shorter. Filter envelope is doing a lot, getting a lot of attack here and then quickly dipping down. Then I'm adding drive. I'm modulating the filter cutoff a little bit. So without the processing, it sounds like this. I threw a compressor on it, 47 millisecond attack, 51 millisecond release. This is just kind of adding even more transient to the sound. Fairly low ratio though. That is going to a saturator, which I am very heavy-handed with. Space Designer, reverb on the bass. Look at that. Blending it quite low, wide and small. And this is the reason I can get away with it. EQ looks like this, cutting out more lows just to make sure nothing after this reverb will come through. I'm also relying on this layer for transient and the high frequency information, so I didn't need this. All 3 of them. Those are also going to a bass bus, which I'm compressing. It's not grabbing a whole lot of the signal. It's just to make sure nothing gets too out of hand. That's going to saturation. This is being side-chained to the kick as well, just to make sure there's not too much low-end buildup when the kick hits. The synths are also getting side-chained to the kick and the snare, and the 808 and snare too. A little bit of distortion on all of the synths, and then pretty low ratio here as well.
FX folder.
So here, whoa, that's not right. It's supposed to be like that. Not supposed to be a crossfade. Yikes. The reason I did it separately from the crash track is because I wanted to pitch it down. It's like a lazy way to get a second crash. And then I'm also adding more reverb. So I also reversed it to get a riser into the crash. And then there's a sub drop here, which is really low. I just boosted a ridiculous amount of fundamental with a narrow Q and then got rid of everything else. It's pitched way down. Originally it sounded like this. I also threw some drive on it. Short attack, long release, no decay. And then over here, it does that. So this one is quite a bit quieter, -5 dB on the gain. This one is +7, so pretty big difference. I am also saturating quite a lot more to get a more aggressive sound out of it. It's also sidechained to the kick, because the kick does have a rhythmic part here.
The whitish noise layer.
The last layer is the whitish noise layer. I started with whiteish noise. It sounds like this. Very similar to the way I process the noise layers. I don't remember exactly how I did it, but I did it. I did get it from the sample. I didn't cheat. The attack looks like this. Sustain is at 100, release is short. I'm not using this filter envelope at all, but I am automating LFO1, which is filter cutoff. Without any of the plugins, it sounds like this. You can see the rate is being automated here. Loop is on alternate. Automating the cutoff as well as the rate of the LFO and the amount of the LFO. Then I saturated it through a ring shifter on it, which I'm also automating. You can see the frequency changing here. So I have it on the dual setting. Feedback's pretty high. Dry wet is at 32%. Putting it through a tape delay. I'm using this because it alters the pitch in an interesting way when it's automated. And this is also doing some LFO modulation, and it's adding some flutters. Then I'm running it through Supermassive, which I believe I'm also automating. Yeah, the mix. And then I'm just kind of compressing the whole thing very lightly. So altogether, the whitish noise layer sounds like this. Honestly, way too much work for how low it is in the mix. I guess it was worth it. Yeah, so that's the session.